A Russian two-star general serving as deputy operations chief of the general staff has been killed by a car bomb, officials have confirmed. The incident that claimed the life of Lt.Gen. Yaroslav Moskalik occurred in the suburban Moscow town of Balashikha. Russia's Investigative Committee has said the improvised explosive device planted inside the car was packed with metal fragments for additional lethality. The news agency TASS has reported that investigators estimated the yield of the device as the equivalent of 300 grams of TNT. The aftermath of the attack was filmed by witnesses. The footage suggests that the vehicle used in the attack, which was parked next to other cars inside a residential area next to a high-rise apartment block, was burned out following the explosion. Last December, a bombing attack that Russian investigators blamed on Ukrainian special services killed Lt.Gen. Igor Kirillov, who served as the commander of the Russian Radiological, Chemical and Biological Defense Forces. He was assassinated alongside an aide as they were coming out of a building in Moscow. The operation reportedly involved an explosive device hidden inside an electric scooter, which was placed next to the entrance and monitored through a camera set up in a parked car, which allowed the perpetrators to time the remote detonation. As of the 31st of December 2024, Ukrainian sources claimed that 21 Russian generals and 1 admiral had been killed during the invasion, while Russian sources have confirmed 10 deaths. Although 7 of the Ukrainian claims were rebutted, the loss of even 2 general officers is rare. After Yaroslav Moskalik, 22 Russian generals have been killed during the invasion. The fog of war has made it difficult to keep track of Russian generals who have been killed. Ukraine's use of effective drones combined with long-range fires has proven deadly for Russian generals and colonels, especially because the Ukrainians have specifically targeted senior Russian officers. At the start of the Ukrainian war, the Russian army lost several senior leaders while trying to conduct offensive-level operations. The deaths of so many Russian general officers at the start of the war also show the stark differences between the Russian and Western concept of senior leaders' responsibilities. The Ukrainians also adapted to the changing battlefield conditions, as evidenced by the fact that 2 Russian generals were killed during Ukraine's counter-offensive.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte said Thursday U.S. President Donald Trump and the leaders of European nations all agree that Russia is a long-term threat to NATO territory. According to Associated Press, Rutte made the comments while speaking to reporters outside the White House following a meeting with Trump and Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. Despite acknowledging that threat, Rutte sounded a somewhat positive tone about the possibility of a U.S.-led peace deal to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. "I am seeing a situation where under President Trump's leadership, this could be brought to a positive end. And that is very important, and I really want to thank him for that," Rutte said. Asked whether Russian President Vladimir Putin really wants to agree to a peace deal, Rutte responded he doesn't know. "I stopped reading his mind, we'll see," he said. "But there is something on the table now, I think, where the Ukrainians are really playing ball. And I think the ball is clearly in the Russian court now." The NATO Secretary-General made the comments after Trump said in the Oval Office meeting that Putin's concession to help forge a peace deal was by stopping taking the whole country, adding that was a pretty big concession. Rutte said he didn't want to talk about concessions from either side. "I really believe that some huge steps have been taken over the last couple of days," he said. "But I don't think it helps if I start to comment on itsy-bitsy bits of it. It doesn't work. So I'm going to do that." Rutte also said that NATO member defense spending has to be considerably higher than this famous 2%, which we wanted to achieve by 2024. It has to be considerably north of 3%. And this is based not on an assumption, but based on careful planning. We know exactly which capabilities we need to reach. We know the gaps there are to keep NATO territories safe, Ruda said.
I'm not seeing a situation where the US is walking. I'm seeing a situation where under President Trump's leadership, this could be brought to a positive end. And that is very important, and I really want to thank him for that.
Do you think that Russian president wants to make peace?
I don't know. I worked with him for 4 years between 2010 and 2014 when I was Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and I stopped trying to read his mind. You mean President Putin? Huh? President Putin. You meant the Russian president?
Yeah.
Yes. So I worked with him for 4 years between 2010 and 2014. I stopped trying to read his mind. We'll see, but there is something on the table now, I think, where the Ukrainians are really playing ball. And I think the ball is clearly in the Russian court now.
How does the global trade war affect NATO unity? Is it accurate to say that you urged U.S. officials not to pressure Ukraine into accepting a peace deal that favors Russia?
No, it's not accurate, no.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. How much are you encouraging other NATO allies to spend on their defense? What would you like that percentage to be?
Yes, it has to be considerably higher than this famous 2%, which we wanted to achieve by 2024. We have seen the last couple of days countries like Belgium and Spain and Italy saying we will reach the 2% in time for the summit. So that is not 2024 but close. But clearly with 2% we cannot defend NATO territory. It has to be considerably higher. And I've said before, it has to be considerably north of 3%. And this is based not on an assumption, but based on careful planning. We know exactly which capabilities we need to reach. We know the gaps there are to keep NATO territory safe. And the good thing is that by spending so much more on the Canadian-European side, we will equalize with what the US is paying on its defense. And that means that with Trump 45, what we have seen is now hundreds of billions, now in total 700 billion spent more on defense on aggregate. But this will indeed bring in not billions, but trillions more for the coming years.
Upon your conversations that you've had here in Washington with the Defense Secretary, with President Trump, from your take, do they understand the threat that President Putin has on Europe as a whole, not just on Ukraine, but Europe as a whole, even the countries that aren't in NATO, like Moldova?
We all agree in NATO that Russia is the long-term threat to NATO territory. To the whole of the Euro-Atlantic territory.
Are you concerned about Turkey?
The president was asked about concessions. Are you aware of any concessions from the Ukrainians or the Russians? And should the Ukrainians be concerned that a deal won't be in their favor?
Well, you know, when you are in peace talks, somehow you have to negotiate. But I think I'm not helping a successful conclusion of these talks. And I really believe that some huge steps have been taken over the last couple of days. And the London meeting yesterday was successful. But I don't think it helps if I start to comment on itsy-bitsy bits of it. It doesn't work, so I'm not going to do that.
Are you concerned about Turkey and Syria?
Madam!
What's your message to the president when it comes to Crimea in terms of Ukraine keeping that or not? What was your message to the president?
Again, these talks are ongoing. It doesn't work, and it doesn't help if I'm going to comment on every aspect of talks and what might be on the table or not. So I don't want to do that. I think we're going. Thank you so much. This was very special. See you next time.